We're back with our budget battle. Let's meet our final two contestants. Jay Powell is from the Bipartisan Policy Center, a think tank founded by Republicans like Senator Bob Dole and Democrats like Tom Daschle. Imagine that, Democrats and Republicans working together and coming out with a budget that you could agree on. Who thought it was possible? We'll also hear from David Callahan of the liberal think tank Demos. Demos teamed up with two other liberal think tanks to come up with their budget. So, Jay, you first. The Bipartisan Policy Center does what?
So our budget is in fact a product of compromise, political compromise between a group of Democrats, liberal and moderate and conservative.
That's what got us into the mess we're in.
Well, but that's what we do. We get everybody, just like it was the real world. We're going to create a budget that gets the United States back to a level of sustainable debt over the course of 10 years. And so what we did, we basically attack everything.
You freeze defense.
We freeze domestic. We cut $5 trillion in deficit reduction, of which $2 trillion is from discretionary spending, $1 trillion in defense, and $1 trillion in domestic non-defense discretionary, and roughly $1 trillion by cutting entitlements. And we raise about $2 trillion in revenues as well through new taxes.
A new sales tax, 6.5%
yes,
sales tax.
On the tax front, what we do is we actually lower rates and eliminate a lot of deductions. We want to broaden the base and create a much more pro-growth tax policy.
We eliminate just about every deduction, except for mortgage and charity.
That's right.
Plus, for entitlements, you'd make rich people like me pay more in my Social Security tax.
That's a tiny, tiny factor. What really gets us our savings is convert the Medicare program into a premium support program, which is really to preserve traditional Medicare but cap its growth and then encourage people to go into a marketplace and buy insurance and use the power of the marketplace to control the growth of Medicare.
You would opt out of the government system and you could do it immediately.
Yes, your premiums would be paid the same value as you would get if you were in the regular Medicare program, but you'd buy private insurance tailored to your needs.
David, tell us about Demos's plan.
Well, Demos put out a plan with the Economic Policy Institute and with the Century Foundation, but we've made some changes, and Demos has its own take on this. And in particular, the big thing we're recommending now, people may not like it, but it's going to solve our problems, is to repeal the entire Bush tax cut. That would raise in and of itself almost $4 trillion over a decade.
Assuming nobody changed their behavior because of the higher tax.
Yeah. Well, we had those higher tax rates during the 1990s, which, as I recall, were a pretty good decade. Everybody did well. We say, let's go back to those tax rates and deal with this fiscal situation and deal with it decisively.
You would cut defense spending, you say drastically.
We would cut defense spending. We would cut defense spending by about $1 trillion over a decade, and that reflects a couple things. It reflects the fact that these wars are winding down, that they're about $170 billion a year, and look, we just can't afford to be the global cop anymore with the kind of defense expenditures we've had.
You know, and over a decade, when you cut $1 trillion, we would have spent $7 trillion, so that's the $7 to $6 trillion.
You know, the previous guest said we have to keep America safe. No empire has ever collapsed because it didn't have a strong enough military. Empires collapse, great nations collapse because of debt, because they don't invest in their future, because of stagnant economic growth. That's why we need to deal with this overextension of our military.
You'd also have a financial speculation tax, a surcharge on top earners. You'd increase the gas tax. How much?
We would increase the gas tax by 50 cents. That would raise $600 billion over a decade and give Americans incentives to move to more fuel-efficient cars. So when gas goes up to $4 or $5 a gallon because of the rise of China and other global things, people are ready to deal with that.
What say you?
Well, I say that the great thing about our plan is that when everybody's at the table, everything's on the table, and you've got to attack everything: spending, entitlements, discretionary spending, and taxes.
Bob Beckel, I assume you like liberal
very
plan?
much. Your point about your revenue for the gas tax, I know one of my colleagues here who jumped on that right away. I I don't understand what everybody's booing. I mean, you don't boo big oil when they just increased your cost $1 a gallon, and they just talk about 50 cents a gallon for an energy tax when the free market has screwed you to the extent of $1.50 in the last year. So I wouldn't pay a lot of attention to that. I do like your point about malpractice, by the way.
How did the free market screw us?
Because the price of oil, the price of gasoline is artificially high. It is not. It is because big oil and speculators. It is. But I do like the idea about tort reform. I think that's a good idea. Believe it or not, there are some Democrats who believe that there ought to be tort reform. I'm one of them. I think it's a very good idea.
Who's the other one?
My sister.
Sandra?
Demos, I fear what this plan really puts on the table and what it really encourages in this country. Raising taxes on the top earners, imposing a surcharge on the top earners in the country, enacting an estate tax. While on the lower income families, we're going to impose a gas tax, raise the gas tax.
Well,
you're going to discourage business. You're going to discourage people from working harder, as far as I can tell from this.
Well, you may recall the 1990s, which was a pretty good time, and we had higher taxes during that period and economic growth. Bush came in, he cut taxes by 25% as a percentage of GDP, and we ended up with the most anemic economic decade since the Great Depression. So we want to go back to a period of higher public investment and somewhat higher taxes, but higher taxes that would still put America at the low end in terms of how much we tax.
And force people to buy very pricey, more fuel-efficient cars, as you were suggesting.
Well, you know, our plan also increases the earned income tax credit and increases some of those tax provisions that help low-income Americans. So it all balances out in the end.
David?
To Jay, I would say you have this 6.5% national debt reduction sales tax. What makes you sure that politicians who have violated all kinds of rules in the past, they say, well, the Social Security lockbox is not going to go to anything but Social Security. We know that politicians have been raiding that lockbox for years to spend on other things. What makes you think that the politicians will be true to their word on this?
Well, we're going to have to put very strong enforcement mechanisms in place, but if you
Nothing
don't do
has
it,
stopped the politicians from breaking those enforcements before.
Here's the thing. We need the money to reduce the deficit. We need the money. I mean, we're also cutting trillions of dollars of spending. If we don't raise the money, then we're going to be borrowing.
I'm just reluctant to give more money to politicians.
But the alternative is we'll borrow $1 trillion a year.
Conflicted.
So you like the strategy of borrowing $1 trillion a year until we can't anymore? I mean, that's the alternative.
All right, next, our three judges will pick their winner, and then the audience votes who will win the Best Budget Award. That's next.